This is Congo is a gritty, realistic look at the internal conflicts in the Democratic Republic of Congo, specifically in the eastern city of Goma, where there is a continuous struggle between rebels and the National Army. It has 4 main characters, and each have a different viewpoint on the conflict. However, they share a common interest in the Congolese people. This is really where the documentary shines. As a bare-bones information dump, it solely looks at the conflict. However, it takes no bias in either of the sides, instead focusing on the struggles that war and dictatorship brings upon the people. The same people who have been running from wars their entire lives. The country has seen never-ending conflicts since the 16th century Atlantic slave trade, and before. The documentary is an overview of the recent history as well as the current goings-on in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Before we take a look at the individual characters, we must first take a brief look at the plot, as this documentary plays out like a film, more specifically, a war film. This comes with cutaways to the goings-on of the Congolese people, as well as a narrator that comes and goes in order to give exposition. The conflict in focus is between the M23 rebels and the National Army over control of the city of Goma. The M23 rebels are typically deserters from the National Army and show a significant example of the corruption in Congo. The army is seen as much less ragtag, however, just as corrupt and brutal. This is the story of 2 assaults on Goma. The first, where the M23 rebels quickly take over, and the second is a drawn-out battle between rebels and Mamadou and his men. The story is followed chronologically and given context by the part-time narrator Colonel Casongo, who is a dubbed officer of the National Army with hatred for both sides. There are several cutaways to Hakiza Nyantaba, the tailor, and Mama Romance, the mineral seller, who each have no direct involvement in the conflict, but both highlight the common people's lives and how they are oppressed. The true excellence of This is Congo comes in its portrayal of the characters and how they fit in the world around them. After watching this when it aired on BBC4 over 3 years ago, it was the characters that stuck in my mind and how the plot was laid out, very similar to a film. After a second viewing years later, I realised that there was no protagonist, no antagonist. Instead, we are shown 4 people, each going through their own struggles in the battlefield of a country, trying to cope in their harshly contrasting worlds. In this essay, I would like to talk specifically about these characters and what kind of impact they are able to make on the viewer. The first of these characters I would like to talk about is Colonel Kasongo. He is the only person in the entire documentary that has had their identity concealed. He has both his face blacked out and his voice deepened and dubbed in post. This is because he is a genuine high-ranking officer in the National Army. This already gives great context as to the state of the nation, where a person like him is unable to show their identity in the fear of certain death. He does not act as a continuous narrator, but is the main source of exposition as to why and how the country has got into such a mess. He is unable to have any true personality through his actions or voice, but we are able to understand so much about him through his words. He is the core focus when it comes to the bias of the documentary. He speaks on how he dislikes his role in the military, but has also become a rebel 3 times and explains how they are just as bad. He is truly shown as someone truly sympathetic to the Congolese people. He does have his biases, he is aware of them, and justifies them in a meaningful manner. He is presented by the production crew as a neutral character, a link between them all, and a great source of knowledge and understanding. The next character acts as the voice of the common people, those who are forced into a nomadic lifestyle in order to escape from the war and protect their families and livelihoods. This is Hakiza Nyantaba. He is a skilled tailor who is forced to travel across the country with nothing but his family, rations of food, and his sewing machine, with which he makes enough money to survive on. He also represents the hatred for the war. Where Kasongo spoke against it, he was quite withdrawn in comparison. Hakiza speaks continuously about his disgust for it and his frustration with being unable to have a normal life in the fear of the death of his loved ones. He notes how he's been running from 6 continuous wars, and the only thing keeping him afloat is his sewing machine. Although he is sickened by the conflict in general, he specifically loathes the government and the army, suggesting that through oppression comes rebellion. He is even seen to say, "It seems that God has forgotten us," showing a complete loss of hope and faith in the face of such atrocities. He does have the least screen time, and I personally believe that this is on purpose, due to how insignificant higher-ups in Congo see people like Hakiza, and in the grand scheme of things, it is near impossible for someone like him to change his own life, let alone have any say on the country itself. The next character, like with Hakiza, is also seen as a common Congolese citizen. However, instead of representing the complete struggle, she represents a form of hope in defiance. Bibian, or Mama Romance, is a raw mineral dealer near Goma. For context, the eastern part of Congo is one of the most mineral-rich areas in the world. However, due to its distance from the capital, Kinshasa, it is very unregulated and undersupplied. It is completely illegal to sell minerals to other countries without direct permission from Kinshasa. And that is where Mama Romance fits into the picture. She represents the system of risk and reward that many Congolese must face in order to afford any real quality of life. Starting her life as a milk seller in Goma, just about getting by, she was given an opportunity to become a mineral dealer. She seized this, and over 10 years in her industry, has since claimed her a home and has been able to send all of her children into education, which is certainly a rarity for the Congolese. In terms of her character portrayal, she is certainly seen as the shining light among the characters, and shows legitimate opportunity in this war-torn country. She is shown to be loving and appreciative of her opportunity and her life. However, certainly understands the risks that she faces. She buys the minerals from local miners and smuggles it across the border to make a livable income. She describes how, if she is caught doing this, then she would be instantly arrested, losing not only her freedom, but her entire family's income. Our final character is my personal favourite, for the way that the documentary is able to present him. I would even go as far to say he's the reason that I made this video. Colonel Mamadou Nguesso is a high-ranking member of the National Army. Unlike Colonel Casongo, Mamadou is proud of the role and is neither dubbed nor blacked out. He shows his face and his uniform like a badge of honour. His first interview scene shows him beating one of his own men for an unknown wrongdoing. This is a great representation of Mamadou as a whole. It shows his ruthlessness and instantly tells us his standing as a patriot in this conflict. Out of all of the characters, he has the most involvement in the conflict in Goma, being the colonel that is called on to defend the city against the rebels' second assault. The story directly follows him throughout his involvement, leading his men fearlessly to a decisive victory, destroying the M23 rebels and being celebrated as a hero. The character development of Mamadou is an interesting one, as he is shown as a ruthless leader to begin with, and slowly throughout his conflict, he is presented as fearless and an incredibly competent leader. However, it's not until the end of the conflict where his presentation is truly flipped on its head. Although his previous ideals and morals are kept in place, he shows a new viewpoint on the entire country to the viewer. This happens in two distinct parts. The first, after his victory, he is shown as a hero to the people, and they celebrate him heavily as he appreciates it, but doesn't oversell it. It then cuts to several interviews where there is a group of high-ranking officers, including Mamadou, and they are continuously asked by journalists who is to thank for their victory, and they all refer to President Kaliba and his tactics. This shows us an interesting perspective on the country and its hierarchy. The second part is unfortunately his death. The documentary shows us that he was assassinated by fellow high-ranking officers as they believed he was climbing the ranks far too quickly, and they did not approve of this. He is no longer presented as a ruthless leader, but a beacon of hope for the people. The contrast of his death straight after his victory and his celebrations present his death as a tragedy. There is footage just after his death. His men are on the floor in tears, crying out their loyal leader is gone, and they no longer have a purpose. Kasongo gives a slight bit of insight, showing that it was his youth and ambition that made Mamadou such a success. However, it was the same reasons as to why he was killed. He wanted to be famous, and in the end, it was his success and his pride that truly finished him off. The final scene of the documentary shows background footage of a bright day with a group of children playing on a ruined plane, whilst a previously interviewed Mamadou speaks on how he is hopeful for the future of Congo. Colonel Mamadou's legacy will be of two qualities: hope and fearlessness. This is Congo is a masterwork when it comes to the portrayal of its characters. It is able to accurately represent the struggles and successes of the Congolese people with just 4 individual characters. Personally, this documentary is one of the most impactful pieces of media I have ever seen, and having the chance to rewatch it and pick my favourite sections of it apart have been an honour. I have only been able to cover a fraction of its content. Because of this, I can't recommend it enough. Thank you for taking your time watching this project. I've enjoyed it thoroughly, and I hope you have too.